You are praised for being everywhere except where it matters most. The city calls this energy. Your calendar calls it life. Yet if you cannot sit alone in a quiet room without reaching for the nearest distraction, your freedom is counterfeit. Watch to the end, and you will leave with a single test, easy to remember, hard to cheat, that reveals whether your solitude is medicine or poison, and a way to practice it so that your inner world becomes a fortress rather than a cage. Before we go further, a humane disclaimer. What follows is philosophy, not medical or personal advice. Stoicism is education for character. It is not a substitute for therapy, professional counsel, or the practical help we sometimes need. Use what serves your judgment. Set aside what doesn't. And consult qualified sources for decisions that shape your health, safety, or livelihood. Now, to the heart of the matter. The habit of staying at home has acquired a modern mythology around it, adorned with diagnoses and accusations on both sides. Some call it laziness, dressed as lifestyle. Others sanctify it as a cure for every wound. Both are shadows. A Stoic avoids being ruled by names and looks, instead to causes. What are the motives behind the behavior? What are its effects on your reason, your relationships, your duties, your craft? If the choice strengthens your ability to live according to nature, meaning to think clearly, to act justly, to restrain what should be restrained and unleash what should be unleashed, then the choice is sound. If it weakens any of these, no amount of branding will sanctify it. The ancients, who did not know our word introvert, knew still the pull of quiet and the traps of withdrawal. They spoke of otium, private time, cultivated rest, contemplation, and its companion negotium, public business, responsibilities, commerce with others. The wise sought a rhythm rather than a pose, otium that prepares you for negotium, negotium that gives meaning to otium. To live always outward is to be a leaf in the wind. To live always inward is to be a ship that never leaves port. The good life is a harbor that repairs and a sea that calls. Let me begin with a story of a preventable downfall, because warnings, like lighthouses, do their best work before the rocks. I once knew a composite of many people, a software tester named Rowan, whose apartment became a meticulously ordered island. On Monday evenings, the kettle sang at 7:10. The lights were warmth itself. A faithful dog circled 3 times on the same square of rug. Outside there were invitations, birthdays with loud rooms, colleagues who wanted one drink, cousins who remembered childhood summers. But Rowan would watch the clock, refrigerate the intentions, and tell the same small sentence, "Not tonight." The sentence is harmless spoken once. It can be ruinous rehearsed for a year. Here is the quiet tragedy. Rowan's solitude started as shelter and hardened into avoidance. He told himself he was preserving energy. But energy for what? His projects did not advance. His temper grew brittle to minor interruptions. When his mother fell ill, the logistics of hospitals felt like foreign bureaucracy. He had kept himself safe from discomfort so long that he could not lift discomfort when duty arrived. The Stoics would call this a failure of training. If we never carry small weights by choice, large weights by necessity will crush us. What principle could have saved him? The dichotomy of control. Distinguish what is up to you from what is not, and train the first so you can endure the second. Choosing to stay home is up to you. Illness, emergencies, obligations that belong to your station in life, these are not. Solitude is justified when it sharpens your tool for the tasks that are coming. If it erodes your fitness for those tasks, it is not solitude, but self-sabotage. The world will still knock. You must be someone who can answer. Now, for a different arc. A delayed awakening that taught a hard lesson in the opposite direction. Consider a journalist I will call Leela. For a decade, she was professionally everywhere. Press lines where microphones bloomed like thistles. Breaking news that broke sleep. Weekends that folded into weekdays without seam. She believed contact equaled contribution, that presence equaled purpose. There is a kind of applause that pays you in exhaustion. She took that salary. It was a Tuesday morning when she forgot a simple quote from a playwright she admired, a line she had carried since college like a talisman. She reached for it. There was nothing. The drawer was empty. That moment frightened her more than the panic attack she had learned to hide. She realized her mind had become a marketplace with no closing hour. She began to cultivate scheduled silence as a discipline rather than a luxury. 10 minutes of morning journaling became 20. A weekly walk without a device became sacred as a holy day. At first, she felt guilty, as if she had abandoned the tribe. Then she noticed her reporting sharpened, her questions slowed, and her conclusions smelled less of haste. The Stoic lesson here is not monasticism, but mastery of attention. The mind is a lens. Constant motion fogs it. Silence is the cloth that clears the glass. This unveiling gives us our first myth to lay down gently. People who prefer to be home are not necessarily less social in the virtues that matter: fairness, kindness, reliability, courage of word, than people who circulate through every room. Much of what passes for sociability is a performance of availability that raises the noise but lowers the signal. The Stoic does not measure connection by volume. We ask, what does this meeting do to the soul? Do I leave more centered, more truthful, more ready to serve? Or do I leave hollowed and resentful? Someone will object. Life requires compromise. Not every interaction can feed the soul. True, duty often tastes plain. But duty that always tastes like ash is not duty. It is avoidance of a difficult but better arrangement. The point is to become a steward of your contexts, not a hostage of them. If home is the place where you become most competent, then home is where you should rehearse competency, not escape from living. We arrive at a theme the Roman writers loved: craft. The person who spends more time at home often discovers loyalty to a passion that others mistake for eccentricity. There is a cook who repeats the same sauce on 20 Tuesdays, and in the 21st, the sauce finally stops arguing with him. There is a luthier who learns to hear whether a plank will sing before cutting it. There is a coder who finds in the discipline of clean functions the same serenity others find in prayer. Stoicism smiles at this because virtue loves apprenticeship. Craft is a training ground where the world's resistance meets your attention in fair combat. You sand, it splinters. You sand again, it shines. Notice the moral architecture hidden here: patience, precision, humility before materials, courage to scrap a bad version, temperance not to indulge shortcuts. If your home is the workshop where such traits grow, you're not hiding from life, you're practicing for it. A related charge comes around often, impatient and inaccurate. People who stay home don't like people. There is a clinical sense in which antisocial means something grave and violent. Popular speech has cheapened it into a casual insult for anyone who declines a party. The Stoic response is to separate character from schedule. A person who loves humanity may meet fewer humans each day and care more deeply for the ones they meet. A person who touches 100 hands before lunch may love nobody. The measure is not the head count, it is the heart's posture. At the same time, if your affection for people never expresses itself in service, it is an expensive ornament. Marcus Aurelius reminds himself that human beings are made for cooperation as hands for holding and eyelids for shielding eyes. He did not write this to bully himself into banquets. He wrote it to set a compass. Movement toward usefulness. If your home-centered routine makes you more ready to be useful, calmer in crisis, clearer in speech, more ethical in trade, then it is rightly ordered. If it makes you fragile toward minor inconveniences and intolerant of the ordinary follies that come with sharing a world, then it is badly ordered. I want to pause here to close and reopen a loop. At the beginning, I promised a test that distinguishes healing solitude from harmful isolation. We are not ready for the test yet, because tests without training become mere quizzes. But we are close. Think of it as a compass you will keep by your door. We will build up to it through everyday practices. Before practice, a word about animal companionship, because many who spend long hours at home share their space with a creature who does not use language and yet says so much. The Stoics spoke of oikeiosis, the natural affection that begins with care for one's own constitution and expands outward to family, fellow citizens, and the wider living world. They were not sentimentalists, but they took nature seriously enough to notice that kindness to animals disciplines our own appetites. A dog whose breath smells like storms teaches you about attention. A cat who refuses your urgency trains you to slow your hand. There is medicine in the ritual, feeding, walking, brushing, the small calendared acts that weave two lives together. There is a danger, too, echoed in Rowan's story. To make a pet the perfect substitute for imperfect human relationships is to ask a friend to be a god. Let the companionship remind you of patience, constancy, presence, and simple joy. Do not let it excuse you from human duties that no creature can carry for you. The modern economy has placed many in remote work, a phrase that can mean liberation or loneliness, depending on how it is practiced. A Stoic will see in remote work neither a moral advancement nor a decay, but a set of conditions to be governed. The first governance is of boundaries. Without the physical ritual of leaving and returning, your day becomes an unbroken surface on which spills are inevitable. So create thresholds that are tangible. A lamp that only turns on when you are at the office. A coat you wear even if your commute is 9 steps. A playlist that marks the changing of the guard from manager to craftsperson to friend. These are not aesthetic tics. They are tools for the psyche. The second governance is of outcome rather than theater. The old office rewarded the appearance of industry, wrinkled brow, full calendar, a pilgrimage between meeting rooms. The home office, when owned with stoic clarity, measures what is in your control, the quality of your work product, the timeliness of your commitments, the civility of your communications, the equanimity with which you handle digital frustrations. One must learn to be visible by being dependable. There is also the question of energy. People who thrive at home often do not need the constant stimulation of open-plan rooms. They prefer the quiet furnace of deep work. But beware the confusion between low noise and high nourishment. Many hours can vanish inside the house without feeding anything that matters. The test is simple. At dusk, can you say what you moved forward? A chapter, a chair, a data set, a letter, a repaired hinge, a reconciled ledger, a reconciled friendship? Or did you simply avoid friction? The difference is the difference between living and hiding. Let us weave in a different story, a transformation journey that worked, not by miracle, but by method. A composite again, this time a teacher named Matteo, who loved literature and dreaded staff lounges. During the years when the world closed, he taught from a desk he built himself. Oak boards joined with care, camera perched on a stack of paperbacks. He discovered that he could design a classroom of attention if he removed the performative clutter. Students read more. They spoke less often, but with more weight. On the day the halls reopened, he noticed his heart race at the doorway, not from fear of disease, but the old, nameless dread of chatter without meaning. Here was a fork in the road. He could use the new option of video forever as an excuse to stay away, or he could use his home-earned discipline to change how he inhabited public spaces. He chose a third thing. He crafted a market day. Once a week, he committed to being physically present in the lounge, not to graze on gossip, but to serve. He entered with a question prepared for a colleague who needed encouragement, a resource to share, a request for counsel he genuinely needed. He left when those were done. Over months, his dread lowered like lake water after rain. His home remained a sanctuary. The lounge became a workshop rather than a whirlpool. This is Stoic engineering. Choose your exposures. Shape your intent and exit with integrity. It is time to say aloud a hard truth that is also a soft invitation. Sometimes staying home is not about temperament or wisdom. Sometimes it is about grief. You were betrayed by a friend, and the door feels like a mouth you do not want to walk into. You lost someone with whom every plaza was bright, and now the plaza feels haunted. You moved to a city where your language is understood, but your meanings are not. A Stoic does not prescribe glib cures for such seasons. We grant them dignity and call them weather, but we also know that grief can mistake itself for identity. The discipline here is to give sorrow a room in your house without signing over the deed. Make a practice of leaving the house for one small errand aligned with duty, deliver a note of thanks, return a library book, buy fruit for a neighbor whose hands are full. Service is a bridge that carries you over yourself. Each crossing teaches your feet the route, and the route teaches your heart that it remains capable of motion. Someone listening now will ask, is there not danger in too much solitude? Do people not need exposure to difference, the friction of other minds? Yes. Stoicism is not a philosophy of hermits. It is a philosophy of citizens who possess inner cities. Exposure to difference prevents the soul from turning provincial, but the quality of your exposure matters. The constant buffet of novelty promises expansion and often delivers indigestion. Curate your commons. Read someone who opposes you and who writes with care. Speak to a stranger with attention and without suspicion. Step into rooms where ideas are debated and egos are de-escalated. Then return home and process. The rhythm matters. The rhythm is everything. Let us finally articulate the promised test, the little compass to hang by your door. Ask yourself 3 questions before choosing solitude, and again after you've taken it. First, is this withdrawal aligned with a responsibility I acknowledge? Meaning, am I stepping away to prepare for what I owe? To my work, my family, my city, or am I stepping away to dodge it? Second, does my time alone leave me more or less capable of kindness? If the first person who interrupts you after your quiet finds you sharper-tongued and thinner-skinned, your solitude was a spa for your ego, not training for your character. Third, does this choice build or break a bridge? If it builds a bridge, a plan, a practice, a skill, a restored mind that can cross back into the world, it is medicine. If it breaks a bridge, ghosted messages, neglected duties, decayed courage, it is poison. Keep these 3 questions memorized. They are short enough to repeat while your hand is still on the knob. There is another sentence I promised earlier, distilled from Epictetus but spoken in plain language and contemporary sense. Keep company first with your ruling principle and then with those who strengthen it. Your ruling principle is your reasoned choice, your prohoresis, the part of you that can consent or refuse. If your hours at home are spent in the company of your best judgment, through reading, writing, building, resting with intent, then you are in the company of a friend even when alone. If your hours among people erode that judgment through flattery, fear, or frantic approval seeking, then you have kept bad company in a crowded room. The hierarchy is not alone versus together. It is wise companionship versus foolish companionship, whether the companion is your own thoughts or 1,000 voices. If you are still with me, you may notice we have traveled a spiral rather than a straight line. My favorite path in philosophy. We began with a challenge to perform solitude rather than perform sociability. We passed through stories of brittleness and stories of renewal. We examined the place of craft, the role of animals, the conditions of remote work, the necessity of boundaries, the dignity of grief, the medicine of service. Even the words themselves have been a training ground, otium and negotium as a rhythm, not rivals, the harbor and the sea as partners. The spiral returns us near where we started, but at a higher pitch of understanding. Let me offer a micro summary that you can carry into the week. Solitude is not an idol and not an enemy. It is a tool. Use it to train attention, to clarify duties, to cultivate craft, to heal without becoming fragile, and to prepare your mind for commerce with other minds. Avoid using it to dodge responsibilities, to feed grievances, or to polish the mirror of self-importance. Measure it by its fruit: clearer thought, warmer conduct, steadier action. If those do not grow, adjust the recipe. There is one more story to complete the triad. The preventable downfall and the delayed awakening are not enough without a small victory that resembles yours. I will call her Neha, a product designer who found herself at home far more than her extroverted friends could tolerate. They teased her gently, then impatiently. She did not argue with their temperaments. She could not borrow them. Instead, she built a schedule that honored her wiring while honoring the city that fed her. Mornings were for deep work at her kitchen table, with the window cracked to hear the birds that mistook her balcony for a safe parliament. Midday she reserved for collisions with humans on purpose. A walk to the market to return jars for the man who saved them for her. A standing appointment with a friend to exchange 3 questions that could not be answered quickly, a visit to the community repair clinic where she learned to mend fabric and taught a teenager to replace the springs in a keyboard. Evenings were anchored by what she loved, literature that did not flatter her, sketching chairs she could not afford, and learning the names of trees she could. Once a month, she volunteered for the unglamorous work of stacking chairs after a neighborhood meeting. When she first began, she timed her exposure like a swimmer who must learn not to panic. After a year, she no longer checked the clock first. She checked her sense of usefulness. Her apartment remained a sanctuary. The city ceased to be a threat and returned to being a field of practice. She did not become a different person. She became more truly herself. What you gain by staying to the end is nothing mystical. It is a pattern. You can lay this pattern over your own days like a blueprint. Ask what you're training when you're alone. Ask whom you are serving when you return. Ask whether today's choice to stay home builds a future in which you can leave home with courage. The payoff is not applause, it is alignment. A life that sounds one note at a time and remains in tune. If you still worry what others will call you, unsocial, aloof, weird, remember that names are wind. Marcus reminds himself that people will speak. Their speech is outside your control. Their opinions are things they carry around in their own heads like luggage. Your task is lighter. Keep your own luggage in order. Pack your mornings with attention. Pack your afternoons with service. Pack your evenings with gratitude. The trip will still be hard. The weather will still change. But you will not be stranded by your own choices. As we close, return to the opening challenge. Can you sit quietly in a room without saluting the nearest distraction? Try it tonight, not as a punishment, but as a celebration. Let the kettle sing. Let the animal in your house remind you how presence looks when it is not trying to look like anything. Write one paragraph of truth to yourself. Build something with your hands for 10 minutes. If you must scroll your own mind first. What did I improve? Whom did I help? What shall I attempt tomorrow? These are old questions, but they age well. And here is the gentle invitation to continue. We have practiced the inward half of a Stoic rhythm. The next chapter is outward, the art of friendship and the architecture of a circle that does not collapse under pressure. How do you choose companions who strengthen your ruling principle? How do you become such a companion yourself? How do you enter the marketplace with clean hands and leave it with a clean mind? If you are ready for that work, I will meet you there. Until then, take care of your space. And let it take care of you in return, not by isolating you from the world, but by preparing you to be fully alive within it.